Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for another Academy for Enterprising Girls webinar. Today's very special guest is a champion of women, famous for standing up for our rights and fearlessly driving important reform. For 12 years, she served in the New South Wales government, 8 of those as a minister overseeing big portfolios like mental health, women, planning, and medical research. Prior to that, she spent 5 years as the country's Sex Discrimination Commissioner, after 2 decades as a journalist. I'm, of course, talking about Pru Goward. Pru, thank you very much for your time today.
Very nice to be here, Jess. Thanks so much for asking me.
We'll start at the beginning. What were you like as a teenager? Was the writing on the wall for leadership positions?
Probably, but as with a lot of natural leaders, I was a very naughty girl. I was very successful academically, which sort of was a bit unusual, and it balanced it off. But I was terribly willful, loved boys, and generally just stuck within the right side of the law at school or at home. I think my parents found my teenage years very worrying. I mean, they were very pleased that I was academically successful, but they were never quite sure what else was going to happen.
So you were a bit of a risk taker then?
Yes, and I think that's very important for leadership. I mean, when I look back, of course, I was mortified by my bad behaviour and the fact that I couldn't please my parents, and my headmistress was occasionally want to call me in and say, Prudence, what are we going to do with you? But, I mean, when you think about it, if you don't have a risk appetite, you are never going to change anything. So those naughty children that you see are often the ones that just like to take a risk, and they think they've calculated it quite well. And of course, children can never get it quite right, so they can be in danger without really understanding that. But by and large, I think risk-taking, and which we call naughtiness because it's breaking the rules, is probably a bit of a qualifier for leadership. Good managers, on the other hand, as I found when I wrote a book on women and success in business, good managers are often very good girls. They're the school captain. They're often the first child in a family. They're not risk takers. They're very obedient. They understand the rules, and we need women who do that as well. But we also need risk takers.
Yeah, right. So a lot of the girls that do our program are teenagers. They're between the ages of 10 and 18. Was running a business as a teenager for you ever an option presented to you?
Well, my father for years kept a cardboard sign that I nailed onto the front of the house, the fence of the house, when I was 6, which offered to do people's washing up, drying, and I said, and 6pence for putting the dishes away, which actually is quite a difficult task, I would think, in somebody else's house.
No one enjoys putting the dishes away.
So I don't think I was a businesswoman, but I always wanted to be independent. And, on my gravestone, I hope they write, she believed in economic independence for women, because I knew right from the beginning how important that was for women. And in a sense, because being often the primary parent and having children, it makes it even more important than that we are economically independent, financially independent. So whilst I wouldn't have been entrepreneurial and clever in the way that you see brilliant businesswomen like Carla Zampatti being, yes, I was always entrepreneurial in the sense that I would take a risk and think of a new idea.
And were you always ambitious? I mean, what did you dream of being when you were young?
Always very ambitious, very driven. And remember, girls get told off for doing that. I remember I'd been in the ABC office in Sydney for about 6 months as a senior reporter. And one of the other staff at a staff meeting just looked at me, and she rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, Pru's so ambitious." And I was sort of mortified. Well, that's again sending women a wrong signal. I mean, ambitious is not necessarily being the nicest person in the room. Ambition is selfish. It's being very driven. It's doing what you believe you need to do. And it doesn't always account for the interests of other people. I mean, you can be ambitious to make the world a better place. I'm not saying that that's selfish, but sometimes the way ambitious people do it is you're not everybody's best friend all the time. And I remember being so embarrassed about being called ambitious. And I've sort of looked back later, and it did stick with me. I was about 31. And I thought, no, you mustn't be embarrassed about being ambitious. You must own it, because it's saying, yes, I do want to succeed. Yes, I do want to stretch myself. I do want to risk myself. I do want to find out the limits of my capacity. And I'm prepared to make mistakes. And again, as I found in that book I did years and years ago, successful women make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but the difference is they don't give up. They learn from them. They think about it. I mean, they torment themselves, of course, with remorse that they did it wrongly and they nearly went bankrupt or whatever it was that happened. But they think about it, but they learn. And if you don't make mistakes, it means you've actually never got to the limits of your capability, because it's only at the limits on the far horizons of what you can do that mistakes really are likely to occur.
It's interesting that you referenced this comment from a woman about your ambition with a negative connotation. Do you think women are getting better at supporting women?
I don't think she meant to be unsupportive. I just think that she really disapproved, the irony being she was herself a very successful reporter. But for her, it had looked much more accidental, whereas I was driven to really get that story and be the first there and persuade somebody that shouldn't do an interview to do an interview. You know, yeah. I did operate at the tough end of the journalism spectrum. But no, I think women are much better now at recognising that when you succeed, Jess, we're all more successful. Every time a woman succeeds, it gives, first of all, it gives other women the encouragement to succeed, but it also says to men in the room, actually, yeah, women succeed. Women are good at that. So it's very important that women support success in other women. And I think that's a new phenomenon. I mean, it's often said that women are terrible at tearing down other women. And I've certainly seen what we call ladder kickers, people who get up the ladder and get to a certain level of success and then kick the ladder away so no other woman can make that jump. But I think that's more a thing of the past. I am very impressed with the way I see young women supporting other young women.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's wonderful advice, just to own it and to not be ashamed of your ambition.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't own it, you won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think that's really wise advice. What about advice that you would give your 15-year-old self?
I think probably I'd say you were clever enough to do well at school and all the rest of it, but I should have been more disciplined. I think it's quite, when you are quite bright, it's quite easy to just sort of wing everything. Oh yeah, I can pick that up because I picked that up so quickly. No, nobody. Hard work is 90% of success. And if you're not prepared to put the discipline into what you're doing, just winging it on intuitive intelligence or skill will get you so far, but it won't get you all the way. So a lot of things have taken me a long time to learn, that if I had been more disciplined about learning at 15, I mean, look, I was no slouch, but, you know, I think I could have done it a lot better. And I think the other thing I would say to my 15-year-old self is, yes, be kinder to people around you. Recognise, I mean, I have a twin sister who, you know, I'm mortified when I realise how badly she suffered from this sort of, you know, get out of my way sister who you know, I has no idea that I was pushing her or crushing her. So I think my 15-year-old self now would say, be conscious that you are a bit different, that ambitious women, thrusting women, you have to still take the time to be kind. And my daughters have taught me the importance of generosity of spirit. And it's something I now notice in successful leaders. You have to have a generosity of spirit. If you don't, you're actually, there's a mean streak in there that reflects on your own lack of adequacy, a sense of your own inadequacy. So be generous about other people. Say how fantastic other people are. Welcome other people's achievements instead of always wanting to be the one who's achieving and compete with the world. You don't need to do that to succeed always. And to acknowledge the success of others actually is a great way of building the team around you, that if you are going to be the head of a department or run a huge business or establish a huge business, actually you need a team. There's no such thing anymore as the sole trader entrepreneur success story.
Yeah, great. Love it. Like it takes a village, right?
Oh, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to create a corporation, and it takes a village to create a company, a business, an enterprise. I mean, the days of as I say, that sole entrepreneur who starts with nothing but his truck and his, last pay from the army, they are gone. Even the Bill Gates of the world, they had to very early on get good at picking teams, and a team won't stay with you if you're not good to them. So that is also about that generosity of spirit, picking the right team, celebrating the fact that you've got some brilliant young person or old person who knows more than you do, not feel jealous of it, not feel threatened of it, because it's all creating what you want to create.
Brilliant. I think this is a really good segue into a colleague of yours question, Alan, who says, where do you think your drive and your love for work comes from? And is that something that can be taught or passed on?
I would say a lot of it's genetic. My grandfather was equally driven. My mother was extremely driven. And of course, you learn it from your parents. But partly it's difficult. Well, my father's dead now, so I suppose it doesn't matter. My father was very ill, chronically ill, all my childhood. He had terrible depression, which meant that often he would be in tears. He managed to hold down a job, but he was also physically disabled by his illness during the war. And I can't remember not being responsible for me, my twin, my younger brother, because we were all, 12 months apart, my brother and I, and my father. So we would go out and we would all have to worry about whether Dad could manage, if I could find a way through the crowd so that Dad could get through, because Dad didn't walk very well. And I think that in addition to drive, often it is a child with who's given a responsibility quite early on, who learns very early to accept that and to live with that, be that person. I'm not saying, go out and find a disabled parent. Of course, I'm not saying that. And most of us are fortunate in having, healthy, capable parents. But I can certainly see that needing to care for somebody from quite a young age gives you a sense of responsibility. And I guess in an ordinary household without those problems, the lesson for parents is don't helicopter parent. Don't do everything for your child. My parents didn't do anything much for us because my father couldn't. They supervised, but they couldn't. They weren't hands-on in the way I've seen modern parents today. And I think that's really important for kids to learn to. You get the dinner on tonight because Mum's not going to be home till 6 and Dad isn't going to be home until 8. Not organising everything for them. Just saying peel the vegetables and you know what to do. So I think teaching children to have efficacy, as we call it, to have a sense of they can do things in little ways is very important. And I do think if we don't do that with children, and particularly girls, it's so easy to protect girls, then we disable them. We don't give them that profound sense of, I can do this. I just have to keep going.
Well, as challenging as your upbringing sounds with your dad's chronic illness, I think we all are the benefactors of that experience for you, because I'm sure that it's led to you being a far more empathetic leader and the reform that you've been able to, really achieve.
Yeah, that's true. And Dad was a very mixed bag, for all that he was disabled in this terrible depression and the tears. He was a great storyteller. All the famous, the sayings that I keep with me all my life. A lot of them are my father's. And, I think it is very important to listen to people. And when I was in the car with my father, I listened for hours because that's what you had to do to keep him happy. And I learned a lot from listening. And I think that maybe does help you be more sympathetic. And the other thing is he was very open. So we didn't, although we were, in a middle-class family and middle-class environment, he didn't look down his nose at anybody. So he taught us that lesson very early on. You just take people as they are and you don't make judgments.
What does resilience look like to you?
There are two things. Inside, you can do whatever you like to yourself. And I beat myself up all the time. And I know a lot of successful people who do. You have to manage that. And it's very easy for women and girls to do too much of that beating up, to be so regretful and so frustrated by having made this mistake and hurt other people, or losing to somebody they felt they needn't have lost out to. So I think you don't need to show the world that. And then, of course, there's that external resilience, which is, yes, I mucked up. What am I going to do? I can apologise, and I can work out how to do better. I can go to that person. I can go to that teacher who's just, really pulled me over the coals in front of the whole class for misbehaviour, as occasionally happened. I can go to her after the class and say, okay, what do I need to do to improve? And apparently I did that. And one teacher who had really been really tough on me in front of the whole class said to my mother the next time she met her, your daughter's a tough little thing. I gave her a real dressing down and I regret it. I did it in front of everybody. And she didn't blink. At the end of the class, she came up and said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Stokes, what do you think I need to do? So I've got better at that as I've got older. You're never going to be perfect at learning and being resilient, and some things hurt you. I mean, I've had two terrible professional experiences in my life, once when I was with the ABC and once when I was Sex Discrimination Commissioner, where I felt I was failing in a very profound way, and I couldn't manage it. I couldn't negotiate around it. And in one case, my hair fell out. And in another case, my skin literally fell off, and we had to paint me in a special paint that they'd used for burns victims during the war, because my skin would just kept breaking apart. It kept bleeding. So, yeah, we just have to keep not beating up on ourselves so much, accepting that you make mistakes, accepting that you're on a path, that you do okay, and then being really keen to learn from it and open about learning from it. The moment you get defensive and think that they're all picking on you and they're paranoid and I need to leave here, you've lost. Eventually, sometimes you do need to leave, but there's a point usually in between where you have that choice earlier, and in my experience, you can survive, but you need to learn how to survive. You need to learn what you need to do differently.
Just looking at your experiences in politics from the outset, it just looks like a really tough game. I've got a question here from Peter, who wants to know, we hear that politics and women don't always mix well, yet the female politicians I know are great. Should young women and girls consider politics?
Yes, I think your caller is right. Women make fantastic MPs. I mean, forget all what you see on television. Most of an MP's life is spent with an electorate where you are the listening person, you are the sounding board, you fix people's problems, you demand extra money for this service or that service. Why haven't we got this at our schools? They've got this at schools in Sydney, in the case of a country member like me. Women are great at all of that. Women are great at negotiating, I think. It is all a matter of confidence. What we often lack, that men have in spades, is that great self-confidence that makes it easier to get over a mistake. In fact, sometimes I used to watch the boys around me, the men in Parliament, and think, do you realise you've just stuffed up? And they're oblivious to it. In a way, we would all be beating ourselves up big time. So politics, a bit like journalism really, is a game of having to have huge self-belief. And we need to teach girls that right from the beginning, or we won't have more women in politics. And let's face it, it's a tough game, but it needn't be like that. And I think when you get to a critical mass of women in politics, then it could even maybe change a bit.
I know you mentioned before about having a strong sense of self, especially in the face of really challenging situations like, election defeats or media scrutiny or even in party politics. What are your techniques for dealing with that? How are you learning to be kind to yourself and not sweat the small stuff?
Well, you have to realise when it's small. I think you've got to be quite good at knowing when you can do something about it. What's that wonderful saying about wisdom is knowing what the difference is between situations you can't change and situations where you can make a change. And I think once you realise that it's out of your hands, your job application is out of your hands, you've been in that shop, working your new business for 50 or 60 hours in the last week, there's nothing more you can do. You have to stop blaming yourself. You have to let go of, oh my God, I'm going to fail. And you have to trust. And I think the other thing is you have to believe in other people. And that took me a while to learn that actually other people are kinder about one another than you might expect. And that they see you as somebody who has genuinely made a mistake and is trying to do better. And I think it's amazing the number of times I would feel very, very down about something I'd said, usually because things come out of my mouth before I even think it can pull them back in. But also, I would also make wrong decisions. And I'd absolutely beat myself up for 3 days. And then I'd run into somebody in the street and I'd say, oh, wasn't that terrible? And they'd say, no, I thought it was fantastic. Look, you're never going to please everybody. Never forget that saying in politics. You're never going to please everybody because it's what will help you get to sleep at night.
Yeah, that's great. What about this book that you've written about women succeeding in business? You interviewed a lot of women who have done just that. Was there a commonality with those women that you spoke to?
Oh, yes. Well, as I say, they were all the entrepreneurial women, because there's women who do very well running other people's businesses, heads of government departments, heads of big corporations, and there are those who set their own business up and grow it from nothing. So one's an entrepreneur and one's an executive manager, and they are different qualities. And sometimes an entrepreneur can establish a business, but they can't grow a business back to up to a level where you then need to delegate and build teams, because it's always been about them, which is the lesson of the modern entrepreneur, like Bill Gates, for example, who I suspect very early on had to be a great team builder as well. So that the book showed to me that you welcome risk takers. Oh my goodness, where would we be? We would still be back in the Stone Age without somebody taking a risk on the next invention or iteration of an invention. You must be able to live with your mistakes. You must have great self-belief, or you won't keep going. You must have, a lot of women said, because being at the top is tough, whether you're the CEO of a large council, whether you're the CEO of a large cruise ship company, whatever it is, it's huge pressure. And they said, you must have people around you who give you that personal comfort and support. That's how they felt. Now, there might be other women who don't need anybody, but I think it's very important to nurture your personal relationships on the way up when you're so busy succeeding. Don't forget that you also need to love and care for your children, your husband, your family network, your friends, and they are all there for you as much as you are for them. So I learnt that lesson. Many women said how important it was to have that network. And then a few of the older ones, women in their late 50s, said, and you have to know when you don't want to do it anymore and you've done enough. You don't need to do anymore. And then let go of it. In other words, don't keep doing something for the sake of being important or having that job or having that business when it doesn't give you that enormous reward that you've always got from it. Move on, do something else. Yeah. So I think they would be the main things that I had learned. But most importantly for the young women watching this, do not think you need to, get in the top 10% of HSC graduates to be a success. you really need, it's all about character success. Yes, you need to be competent. So if you're going to set up an engineering business, it pays to be smart about engineering. So I'm not saying don't be competent, but don't think that if you haven't done well at the HSC or you've dropped out, that you can't succeed. I mean, so many women particularly, it was when the husband left them with $20 in the check account, or when their parents died and left the child with sort of nothing. It's often those circumstances which that force these women to set up their own business and to take a risk by backing themselves in what they thought was the only thing they knew. And I think that's very important too.
Wonderful. So my last question for you is that many of the enterprising girls that are within our community are sitting on some really bright, innovative ideas, but they might just be lacking that courage or strength of character to then make it happen. What's your advice to them?
Work out a plan. Often you just don't know where to start. So you've got a great idea, go and talk to somebody who is in business that you know vaguely. Go and talk to an accountant if you know one. Find somebody. Teachers, unfortunately, often don't have much idea about entrepreneurship because that's not what they do. But sometimes you'll find a teacher who will say, "Oh, well, you would start here with a business plan, or you need to work out how much money you'd need to borrow from the bank. You'd need to work out what the market for this really would be. Yes, you've sold it to all your friends, but does that mean you can sell 5,000 a week or a year or whatever it is that you're considering making?" So for those of you who have an idea, I think that plan, I love lists. Whenever I'm in a frenzy or disturbed or depressed, I always just write a list. It's very soothing. And I think I'm not the only one that does that.
No, I've got mine right here next to me.
It's a great little therapy, but write your list. What do I need to do? Write it a couple of times, keep thinking about it. Go on a website. How to set up a business. I mean, you have to have an ABN. I mean, there's all sorts of obvious things that you need to do. And then you have to work out how to market it, who you will need to help you market it. Sometimes you can't do it all on your own and you go into partnership with somebody else who's also prepared to risk a bit of money or risk not working in anything else for 6 months whilst you get this business going. But at some point you're going to take a risk. So you go into that with your eyes open. At some point you're going to take a risk on losing money or time or whatever it is that you have put into it. But so does everybody. And as a young Russian woman who came here and is now a very successful businesswoman said to me, remember we're comparing ourselves with Russia here, it is so easy to make money in Australia. You just have to work hard. And I think that's the answer. Have a plan, be persistent, look for partnerships. Don't assume you can do it all on your own. In fact, I think it's wise to do it with other people because in the end, if this business is of any size at all, you're going to need other people. So you might as well start off like that.
Brilliant. Pru, I think I could talk to you all afternoon. Thank you very much for your time and your generosity. We are really very grateful. And anyone looking for more information can head to enterprisinggirls.com.au where they can find a whole heap of resources on what to do with their idea, to grow their idea, to give birth to their idea. So, yeah. Thank you again, Pru. We are very grateful.
Thank you, Jess.